Hello, and this is our last week of class. Next week is technically, I guess, finals week. Although hopefully there's enough time this week for you to do plenty of your final assignments, and we've set enough of the groundwork over the course of the past 7 weeks to allow you time to actually do things ahead of time. And so there might not be much more final about next week. It might just be a lot of revisions. Anyway, so for this week, before Friday, because your working drafts are due Friday, you need to put all the pieces of your course syllabus together. So your course objectives, your course assignments, everything that you've done in pieces, it needs to be in one document. There's also a lot of kind of technicalities that every syllabus has to have. I'm not too worried about that. The hard work that's usually pre-written by a university or colleges, and so that's something you just cut and paste into it at some point. So we need to see kind of the course objectives and the course assignments and all the things that you've done over the course of the past couple weeks. So it must be all together. But something I want to emphasize is you must have a completed course calendar that has a fully fleshed out week by week assignment guidelines for your students. And so just a general overview is not going to work. I need you to tell me week by week what assignments you would make, and so I can kind of see what your pacing is, what projects you're using, how you're setting things up, all that. So it needs to be a real deal syllabus that you could potentially give to a class, say in June. All right, so it must be full and complete. Anything less, you will be graded accordingly. Also, start looking over your teaching statements. Those are due on Friday, revised teaching statements. And some of you turned in teaching statements, like I mentioned on the news bulletin, that were teaching statements about the class that you were teaching for this course, and that's not the purpose of teaching statements. And if that's what you did, it means you didn't read the assignment and you didn't read the examples that I gave you. And you didn't read your peers' teaching statements either. So what a teaching statement is it's your general philosophy and overview of teaching. So what approach do you bring to teaching? What's important to you? Why do you teach? What informs you as a teacher? What assignments do you use? That sort of thing. So it needs to be general. It needs to be something you could turn into any job application, and they'd have a sense of what you would do the minute you step into a classroom, in a sense. So I probably should have made that clear before, but for those of you who didn't do that, I tried to approach you individually. But just keep that in mind. So if you haven't fixed your teaching statement in this way, you need to do it now. So I'll be looking for that. And here's the thing about grading. Many of you have decided, have started to get worried, and I understand that. There's a measure of uncertainty in my courses because you haven't turned in much and you haven't been given grades back on much. But if there's really something to be concerned about, I will have approached you by now. And I think some students are set off guard because I very rarely give perfect scores. I don't think things that are graded subjectively should be given 100s because no one's turning in anything that's perfect. That's always bothered me even when I was a student, to hear students complain about, well, I didn't get a 100 on an essay. It's like, how could you have gotten a 100 on an essay? You didn't do something absolutely perfect. But again, just keep in mind that there is a little bit, there's a few points cushion built into the discussion. So if you're worried, you'll have that there too. And anyways, so the biggest thing that you can do at this point is make sure that you have working drafts of both of your final assignments completed by Friday. And that you look at the feedback that I give you, and I'll try and get it up as soon as possible. That you look at the feedback that I give you and you incorporate that into your final project, because I will notice, and part of how I know that you have learned is if I give you critique, if I give you criticism, and you know how to incorporate that and then build upon it. So I will not say that you have mastered a course, although this is kind of different. This is not a class you can master per se. But anyways, I will not say that you have mastered a course if I can't say fix this and you go back and fix it the way I say, because that shows me that you didn't understand something and you didn't ask about it. So there was some disconnect there. So it's very important that if I give you feedback, you need to fix it. And that's what I'll be looking for. But I'm not going to be hunting anyone down next week to make sure that you're fixing things. So that is your responsibility. And I just bring this up because this has been a problem in the past. And, the responsibility is on everyone in this class, each class member, to do their job and to seek out the questions and the answers that they have. And I'm not going to be hunting you down. But I will do my best to give you substantive feedback to help you as much as possible with what you turn into me on Friday. And just so you know, if you don't get it to me by Friday, and if you don't post it on the discussion board, then I'm not going to promise you that I will get feedback to you in a time that will help you turn it in on time and get a good draft to me by next Friday on the 3rd. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. Okay, so a few things from this week's readings. Things that kind of stuck out to me that might be kind of interesting, or things that I thought were interesting. So there's a lot of ideas about active learning, how to build active learning into your courses, and some of it was really neat. But at the same time, I'm just thinking, I don't know how many times I've actually seen this happen at the college level. As an undergraduate, I was an English major, and what we did was we sat in a class and we talked as a class over lines of poetry and lines of literature, passages of literature, and you just opened it up to discussion. And for me, that was very rewarding, and I loved every bit of it, except for a few classes, I guess. But, I absolutely loved that. But I don't remember a lot of this breaking down into groups and having to study that way and thinking of it as active learning, study groups, things like that. So, it'd be interesting to see what experiences you have each had in your own educations in this kind of active learning sort of models, and, how we might implement that into our courses, because it's definitely food for thought for me. But one thing I'm kind of that struck me in this talk of active learning was that it seems like, instructors are become only mediators. At one point it says instructors are resources. And I'm curious, how everyone feels about that, because I think that's very true to an extent. Again, I like discussion intensive courses, but I'm just curious what y'all think about just kind of instructors taking a more passive role in facilitating a course rather than standing up and instructing directly. And then it also makes me wonder, is there value in passive learning, which I kind of interpret to mean, and I don't think that's what they discuss necessarily, but kind of lecturing, because college higher education is highly lecture intensive in some cases. So just some things that struck me. I'm wondering what you're thinking, if you noticed any of it. And a big thing in higher education right now is service learning. I've seen that quite a bit over the past couple years. These campuses try to orient programs, campus-wide or college-wide, about service learning, where you work a lot with communities and things like that. And I wish they'd actually discuss that a little bit more, because I'd personally like to learn more about it. I know University of Iowa, where I got my PhD, they were big on service learning in some areas, and SMU down in Texas was big on that too. So I'm just curious. I wish they had talked more about that, because I think that's a pretty good example of experiential learning and hands-on learning. But then when they talk about breaking students down and have students teaching students, I kind of wonder about that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't disagree with it, and I think there's certainly a place for it. But I think that it's something that you really have to monitor the power dynamics on. And so what I've done before in course group work for courses that I've had, I make groups assess each other. And so they do it, it's independently. They don't know how each group member assessed the other group members. But I think that's important because, and then that averages into my assessment of the group, because, very rarely do you see a group work together where the work is carried evenly and it's distributed evenly across the group. And let's just face it, with undergrads, there's a lot going on there. And so when it comes to breaking students down into groups and making them work together versus individually, you really have to monitor the power dynamics and find some way to figure that into the course component. Otherwise, you have one or two students carrying the whole group and the rest aren't doing anything, for whatever reason, because you have students that really care about their grades and other students that are just too busy with other things. And it's tricky. It really can be very tricky. And then sometimes you have the person who becomes, the team leader, who's actually not the strongest person on the team, and they lead them astray. And people don't want to hurt other people's feelings, and so it can be very very tricky, and it's something that you'll have to deal with as an instructor when you have groups. um, but you have to account for that, and you have to account for the work that they do there, and I think that's only the fair thing to do as at the undergraduate level, particularly. So, but then the whole breaking students down into pairs and peers teaching peers, I just have all these bad memories of being the smart kid in class, quite frankly, and you know, getting picked on, and just to me, that's a potentially very exploitative relationship. So I'm wondering what you all think about that and how you feel, because I think within a class, to break down like a stronger performing student, pair students up with like stronger students with weaker students, that could be a problem, to me personally. What I've seen other instructors do, there was a zoology professor at the University of Oklahoma who would have students who got A's in his course in previous semesters would then work as tutors for students currently in the course. And so that kind of removes that power dynamic, I think, that might be present if you have two students that are in the course at the same time. Yeah, I don't know, maybe just being the nerdy kid, growing up, that might be speaking here. So just kind of my thoughts on that. Maybe you all read it differently, but it'd be interesting to see what you think. So these are, I think, predominantly um, some thoughts, but also what's your experience been with asynchronous learning environments, like in online courses? I'm not sure how I feel about it. It's kind of hard for me to adapt because teaching face to face, in traditional classrooms, you have that interpersonal reaction, and so I can gauge better if students are getting what I say. I can see how students are interacting with me and with each other, and I can monitor that better. But the one thing that I also like about traditional classrooms that I'm having a hard time adapting to with online courses is, it's a finite amount of time each week. And online courses are very good for students, but for instructors, it's the time. You don't have office hours, you don't have course prep hours, and you don't teach between these set hours of the day. It's something that you have to monitor continually through the week, and so it changes the time requirements just a little bit as an instructor, and I imagine for students as well, because most of you monitor the discussion boards very regularly, and you're very good about it. And so just that, continual requirement of your time is something that I'm not complaining about. It's just something that I have yet to adjust to. And for me personally, if I don't do something regularly, it's hard for me to get in the groove and figure it out and get it worked out. And so, I taught one course at the beginning of the semester last fall, and then one at the end of the semester this spring. And so, and then my life is completely different now than it was just last fall. So adapting to that asynchronicity and, melding it with everything else that we have to do. I'm curious how other students deal with that, because for me, within my life, a set schedule, it's not rigid, but it helps me like make sure I get stuff done and do things the way I want to, and do them to the, level that I want them to. And so, the lack of, I guess I just don't have the opportunity in these online courses to sit down and develop the discipline that I'm used to in traditional classrooms. So, I'm curious what your thoughts are, as usual. And then another thing that stuck out was this idea of problem-based learning, which I think is like in secondary education in a lot of the schools in Texas, the district that we just left in Dallas. They were developing high schools that had a different model and a different setting, and and they were called academies, and it was for students who needed alternative learning settings. And And their courses, I think they were broken down to the traditional subject areas, but they were project based. And so I think this is more of this problem based learning that was discussed here. And, and I'm kind of, I'm still trying to figure it out and see how it kind of applies to our mass communication discipline, because it seems like ours is on the top end, because a lot of what journalism is, unless you're like doing enterprise reporting, is reactive and not proactive. So, you're having to do a lot of the information gathering after something has happened. So maybe it is kind of a problem-based discipline, problem-based field, but it seems like our field is kind of turns this idea on its head. And I don't know. I'm still thinking about this one. I'm still kind of chewing on it. But a lot of the coursework that we have in mass communication is practicums, and like a lot of the courses you're all proposing, the line producing and stuff like that. It's very specific, and to a specific set of skills and competencies. And so I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. So really, in closing, we're at the end of the course, and the key for you to know is, like, if you get in a predicament or you're in a pickle, you really need to get a hold of me as soon as possible. So it's going to be a lot easier to fix problems or to troubleshoot if you talk to me this week or beginning of next week versus next Thursday or Friday morning. So it's very important you stay on top of things, and if you see trouble down the pike, you have to let me know, and I promise you I'll work you through it. You'll be fine. I'll get you through it. There's no worries there, but you have to let me know. Because if you turn in something next Friday on the 3rd and I'm just left like, I don't know what happened here, it's on you at that point. But up until that point, I will do what I can, to get you through it and work it with you and make sure you turn in something that you're comfortable with, that you're proud of, and you can get the grade that you want. So that's what I'm here for, and that's what I'll do. And so again, I would urge you not to email me through the D2L email, because I'm not on that very much during the day, and I'm honestly, I don't have access to my South Dakota State email very often either. And so the best email to get me at is my work email, which is marianne.martin@okhouse.gov. And so that comes to my phone. I'm sitting at that email all day during the day, and if something comes up and you need to get a hold of me, that's the best place to get me. Weekend, weekday, weeknight, whatever. And one last thing that I forgot to make a slide for, you have to fill out a course evaluation, and the link is up right now on, I sent it to you in your D2L email, and it should be posted on the news bulletin on D2L. So please do that. That link goes dead at midnight on Friday. So I need you to do that. They've been on me about it. I've been pretty bad. So please take care of that. But anyways, let me know if you have any problems, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.